starts in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go.
Everybody, welcome to Rebellious Ruth. Good evening here in South Africa. We are busy pondering getting into the year. We're dealing with school, and in order to sort of change our mindset and maybe make a shift, a fundamental tectonic plate is my guest, Damien Holt. So welcome, Damien. Hello.
Hi.
So Damien's been, how long have you been? You've been a teacher for 15?
I mean, the term teacher is quite wide.
Okay.
No, not archaic, but quite a wide term. So I've been a surf instructor. I've been running NPO workshops for a long time with kids in different communities, trying to bridge privilege, bridge gaps. But then I've also been a tutor and a teacher in the traditional schooling system and in things like the radio schooling system, and also outside of school. So
okay. And nowadays you do private tutoring, and like you said before, you've done private, you've done government, and you do au pair, teacher, tutor. But
also
I think yes,
sorry?
you run your origami. Sorry, your origami.
Yes, I run a little NPO called Origami Zoo, and what we do is workshops using art therapy, using various different like body mapping, different tools with kids to try and approach learning from a different place. Basically, we can talk about that. Yeah.
Okay. No, we will. We'll get into it. But you were also saying that you looked up since when education started, and will you tell us, please, give us the reveal when the traditional, or I like to call it archaic. I always go back to that term because to me it is like a dinosaur, the Stone Age.
I was reading something about, I wish I could remember his name now. I can't find the quote, but a man who's studied education all his life has said that education is the biggest experiment that we've ever conducted, basically. And we are still in the process of experimenting. It's not a complete idea yet. We're still experimenting, and we have to remember that it's an experiment. It's not it needs to grow. It needs to change. We need to experiment with it. Can't stay in one place. Anyone who's in innovative business or in any sort of training sector or anything like that will tell you that it's consistently about change. It's consistently about trying new tools, trying new approaches, and we're not doing that with our schooling system. We're staying in one place, and I think it's actually quite damaging. And the teachers know it. The teachers in the private schools and the government schools know it. The teachers in foundation phase traditional education know it, but they feel stuck. And I see a lot of people actually taking it upon themselves now to create their own version of education because it just doesn't work for them. So you've got a lot of homeschooling going on.
Yes, which I think is very inspirational, and I wish I could have the time to do that, but I am a full-time working single mom, so to speak, single. But the point is, and there are so many out there. There are so many single moms out there who cannot worry about, the type of well, every mom worries about the type of education, but I think we're just so overwhelmed at the end of the day. And I think for a lot of, if I'm being totally honest, I think schooling was initially developed to keep kids out of harm's way, right? To have them in some form of structure and some form of day-to-day business so that they would have something to do and keep them out of mischief, right? And they're probably very dark. I mean, just hearing about my mom's schooling at the boarding house, it's terrifying with the Catholic matrons and the, pardon?
It is scary. And what's even scarier is that a lot of it hasn't changed that much over the last 200 years. So the current system of education that we're using now is almost identical to 200 years ago. And there's no other business, no other industry, no other sector or part of a country's infrastructure that you can think of that would have remained exactly the same.
Stagnant. That's the word I was thinking of. Stagnant. Literally stagnant and putrefying. Like, help me here, Mr. Tutor. But I think Fiery Nessa she mentioned cottage schools. Do you know the term?
I don't know.
I've heard the term before. So I think it's like where children come together. It's like private homeschooling, but where children, are you going to Google it? Where children come together and basically learn under one classroom. Fiery Nessa, maybe you can explain a bit. But I have definitely heard the term before. So I think the children are not all the same age. Like, it's actually gone back to maybe what was in a traditional school 200 years ago, where you'd like a huck fin, where, you'd have kids from all different ages being in the same school, and the teacher would try and teach to each one's level, which is also like a huge task. But so under the umbrella of progressive education, right? It's homeschooling, correct?
It could be. Homeschooling is definitely included in more progressive education. So there are a lot of countries that are experimenting with education now, mostly in Europe, Australia, and I think that partly is to do with having the money to do that in the country. What's actually quite wonderful about South Africa, because the government schooling system is not working for a lot of people, because we don't have the infrastructure and the money in the country to experiment with things like education, it means that there are so many sort of entrepreneurial people creating their own schools, creating their own ideas of education. Because the thing is, we just don't have the resources to suddenly run with Regio, across borders. But it's creating all sorts of very, very interesting approaches to education, and I think we're going to see a lot of really interesting teaching techniques. We're already seeing a lot of artists, musicians coming out of sort of a place of struggle, I suppose, and that's the adversity is not. I would say I always use the quote: "Happiness isn't the absence of adversity, or growing isn't the absence of adversity." So I think it's actually very important in some senses, or it's kind of a gift in a way, if you flip the whole thing around, that we have to take it upon ourselves, that we have to decide, take responsibility for it and decide how we're going to change it in our own homes and in our own, with what we have available to us personally. The government's not going to do that. And I think we know that.
For sure. And I suppose for me, I personally feel a little bit overwhelmed because obviously, like I said before, dealing with a full-time day job and then having to come home and still make dinner, make sure the kids bath, make sure. I mean, it's hectic. It's hectic being a full time, single mom, and so many mothers are. And you also, I want to get to the Mankind Weekend you spoke about, but tell us more about Regio a little bit and how we could sort of implement that in South Africa, perhaps.
So it's already happening. There's
Okay.
a radio school in Emmarentia, close
Okay.
to London in Johannesburg.
And Reggio is spelled Reggio.
Reggio.
Right.
Reggio Emilia is a tiny village in Italy, and they
Mm-hmm.
basically decided that they were just going to reinvent education, or that they were going to start doing schooling their own way. And it's become a very, very effective way of working with foundation phase, or working with kids in general. It's incredibly collaborative. It's about, what I would call our traditional schooling a top-down sort of approach, basically. So the teacher stands at the front of class and says, these are the 10 things you've got to learn, write them down,
Mm-hmm.
remember them, and spit them back at me in 6 months' time when I give you an exam.
Mm.
What Reggio Emilia does is the teachers are consistently coming from a place where they are open to learning. So it's never just that the teacher knows what needs to happen or has all the knowledge, and the kids are sitting, taking it in. The teacher is just as much in a learning process as the children are, and collaboratively they are creating something together, or they are learning together through. So the 100 languages we talk about in Reggio Emilia, those are all the different tools that one can use in learning. So, for example, origami could be one of those 100 languages, and it's just a tool to. Yeah, origami for me is a very specifically a very effective tool, because it bridges language gaps, it bridges age gaps, it bridges ethnicity, privilege. You can pick up a piece of paper out of the gutter and do some origami. So it's very effective in that sense. It's quite a powerful thing. So Reggio uses a lot of things like that to try and. Sorry, you muted, Ruth.
My dog was growling at some things. I thought, no, let me mute. Sorry. So origami is very. I think you've got to be patient to do it. You've got to have. Obviously, it takes. I know someone like me. I think it would take patience. Yes.
Yes,
And control.
it does. It's an interesting medium, because it's both left and right brain, so it's quite analytical and structured and linear, and at the same time, it's using your right brain to create something. I did a what we call a provocation in Reggio Emilia,
Mm-hmm.
the Reggio schooling system. A provocation is something you would offer the children. So you would have a lesson plan. And Reggio has a syllabus, has a very strict, very specific curriculum, but it's just about being changeable. It's just about being able to collaborate with what's happening in the moment when you offer the children this lesson plan that you've sort of gone home and done. For something to change, or something to happen if one of the kids suggests something different to what you've planned. So it's not so rigid that you don't explore that unknown at the same time, which I think is incredibly important in a learning process. So I took some paper to them, and my plan was to teach them how to fold, I think it was a frog or something like that. And they ended up making garbage monsters, and that's fine. And they had an incredible learning process. We did do frogs at the same time, but it was also there's so much happening outside of that, outside of what you're planning, or outside of the the structure, or outside of the lines. It's like, don't color out of the lines, but Reggio encourages you to color out of the lines a
The
little bit.
lines. Just
And to really explore that, and really explore what it means to be you, as opposed to
a
what
number.
or what the schooling system expects from you, or something that I wanted to talk about is how I realized after school, I only realized that the entire time I'd been doing my schooling for someone else. I never felt that my schooling, or the learning that I was doing, or the subjects that I was practicing, all the huge influx of information, which I really struggled to take in that way, wasn't for me. I didn't ever feel like I was doing it for me. I always felt like I was doing it for my parents, or for the teachers, or for the world, or whatever it was.
Right.
And it's now only after school that I've started learning things for myself, because I want to learn them, because I'm curious, because I want to. It felt forced upon me. And one of the reasons is because it wasn't presented in an engaging way to me specifically. I'm not an A-type personality at all. I'm not an academic. And a lot of children are not. A lot of people are not. There are seven recognized different learning types. Auditory and musical learners, visual and spatial learners, verbal learners, logical and mathematical learners, physical or kinesthetic, social, interpersonal, solitary and intrapersonal. And they keep expanding, adding to that.
Yes.
So the fact is, you can't take one kind of learning and just force that on everybody, because
shove it. Yeah.
it's just not going to work, really.
No, it's not cricket, as Rebellious Ruth says. So exactly, I got chills, because you put it in a nutshell exactly. Like I felt the same way. I wasn't doing it for me. And lately I've been saying to my teenager, you've got to think of it, it's for you. And I don't think kids today even get that. I think they still feel like they're not doing it for themselves, because I don't think they're not finding their niche. They're not able to find their niche, their passion,
But that's also because it's not accessible. For someone who's an auditory or visual learner, it's not accessible to sit with a textbook and read 20 dates and then write them out. That's fine for some. That absolutely works for some people.
Yeah.
But for a lot of people, it doesn't. And we need to look at trying to cater for as many of those learning types as possible when we're teaching, so that it's not just, for example, verbal learning or logical and mathematical learning, for example, but that it's also kinesthetic. For me, I'm I'm definitely an auditory and musical learner. I'm definitely a visual learner. And I want to be able to physically interact with that. I want to be able to move my body. I want to be able to learn through using my hands and creating something. That for me is how I really find learning very effective. So that's why I do a lot of creative things like music. And
so I see. That's amazing. So I see Buzzy Moments is asking for your platform. So you are on Instagram, and it's Origami Zoo.
Origami.zoo.
Sorry, forgive me.
As I always say to the Italians, origami.zoo. Origami.zoo. Yeah.
Okay. Do you speak Italian? Are you quite fluent now?
I teach a lot of Italians English, but my Italian is atrocious.
Well, I have an Italian friend who lives not so close to me, but she comes to see me fairly often. We try and see each other twice a year, and I love it. It's such a beautiful language. It really is. It's very difficult. It's one of those languages where I was like, no, I don't know if I could master it. But yes, I don't know. I don't know if I think I'm definitely a visual learner, definitely. And I also like doing. But to regurgitate and to do how we did things in the old days, it actually gives me chills. And I mean, we still had corporal punishment when I was at school.
Me
You know,
too.
you don't look it. You don't look it. So yes. Oh, Buzzy saying, please. I think so. It's
Well,
Instagram origami.zoo.
is there somewhere I can comment here?
If you go to, I think so. If you go to, I'm going to put it on. Should load it. Origami.zoo. Check the comments, see if that's right.
Comments.
I don't know how do you, but it's on Instagram. On Instagram.
It will obviously be at origami.zoo on Instagram. Yeah.
Okay, I'm still learning the whole Instagram thing. I still haven't, mastered. I'm trying to pick one and become a master. In my job, I feel like I'm. What's the saying? Master of what? Doer of all, jack of all trades, master of none.
Do you know that quote is in fact, that's not actually how the quote was initially written.
Okay.
It was actually, you look it up. But I heard a podcast about this.
Mm.
The full quote, jack of all trades, master of none, but oftentimes better than a master of one, is the full quote.
Okay, I like that. You gotta send that to me. I think I want to start practicing that. Because that's what I sort of sometimes feel like.
Yes.
Whew. But and I'm definitely very social. I'm a very social person, and I do sometimes feel like my abilities are not being used to my potential, and it is stagnant, and it is frustrating. And I think if this is how we feel in our adult lives, how much so do our children feel?
Our responsibility now as adults and parents and people who have struggled through that system. So I got incredibly depressed in school, and the reason I'm doing the teaching now that I do all the workshops I'm doing now, it feels like a no-brainer for me to go into that now and try and change that in some way, because I don't want children to feel the way I felt. I don't want them to feel unseen. I don't want them to feel unengaged and shut down and in their learning process. Ridiculous. For 12 years, the foundation of your life, the sort of base roots of where you're coming from, to spend that time feeling unengaged and unseen and put upon by your education system.
For sure. And almost belittled. And it's actually, when I think about my experiences and how I had to change subjects because I was belittled by teachers, and I mean, I could actually open up a law. I should, perhaps. We were considered, our year was considered, the school was taken over by another private school, quite a big conglomerate on the JC currently. And I felt we were literally the guinea pigs in the churn of the machine that is the schooling system. And it totally, I was I loved biology and science, not so great on maths, but because I wasn't encouraged, the last science teacher we had was fun, enthusiastic, and we used to do experiments, and we always got out. And then we got someone that sounded like the guy from Charlie Brown, the teacher who wah 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 wah, and it was totally. I can only take from my own experiences, but I'm so worried for my son currently. He is going through, I think for schooling nowadays, especially with having been stuck the last 2 years, it's very difficult for children to adapt. But children are resilient and they do adapt. But I think it's so important for someone like you to recognize, and if teachers can recognize what you've been through,
teachers recognize, and they don't necessarily feel, they don't know what to do. And I think that even that is communicated unconsciously to the children that they're teaching is that the teachers in the system are also feeling shut down. They're also feeling like this isn't necessarily working anymore.
Mm.
And that we have to find a different way. We have to find something that makes us as teachers feel engaged. Many teachers will say if they're not enjoying the information or the subject matter, or feeling engaged by it, or feeling fascinated by what they're teaching, how on earth can they expect the students to feel that
To
way?
do it. Exactly.
So I mean, it's a very layered thing, and it's
Was it
also
what was
passed
South,
down.
South Africa changed some sort of a system, I think 10 years ago, to a very administrative system. We try to take on, I can't think of the name now, it eludes me, but teachers got basically bogged down in doing a lot of admin, and they had to record everything and data capturing, and really make sure. Do you know what I'm sort of talking? If my one friend was online, she would have had it a second for us, like, yeah.
I can't
But
think.
I think teachers are also under huge pressure, and then you've got you've got these parents that my little darling is like an angel and he should be you know and unfortunately I think there has been a time where I fell into that trap at one stage. I also was like, my child's special. Like like why isn't he doing what he, or just being so um you know engaging, or how can I make it better, or why isn't he achieving, what's wrong with you, teacher, why, and it's terrible. And I think the pressure on teachers now as well with private schooling, and I don't know if there's much pressure. I mean, we all know when was it, in 2020, the teachers were constantly on strike, the government departments.
Yeah.
We haven't heard. In fact, it's been very quiet in terms of are the textbooks being delivered. Remember, there was that whole fiasco, I think, in 2016, how the textbooks just didn't arrive. But yeah, it's almost like, but in every aspect of our government, we just need a new government, actually. That's how I feel.
We've got to accept the fact that we might not get a new government. And that's what's, that's the truth of it, is that we have to, I think people are coming to terms with that. And maybe as a global thing, that how can we take responsibility ourselves in our own lives, day to day, step by step, in terms of what we want for our children, in terms of what we want for ourselves, because as caregivers, as tutors, as anyone involved in sort of the growing phase of your child's education or whatever, you're also who they're learning from all the time. It's so learning is happening 24/7. It's not like learning starts at 8 and ends at 3.
Correct.
So I think that we as adults also need to, I know that if, for example, I'm not doing art and I'm not exploring things that interest me and make me excited, it's very difficult for me to take that energy into a teaching space, or a place where I'm trying to impart knowledge on someone, or share learning with a group of kids. And we kind of, it was almost, schooling was a bit of a disheartening time for me, in terms of, I think it almost ruined my learning process a little bit. It ruined my, it made me feel like learning was not an exciting and positive and curious and engaging thing. It made me feel like learning was a tough
punishment.
Yeah.
A punishment.
I've had to relearn what learning means to me. I've had to relearn, learn that growing and learning, taking on more knowledge is actually exciting. I didn't, that was almost like this. But I think the biggest thing I learned, I wanted to just go back to the social component of it, were the things that were not spoken about, the things that were not necessarily learnt or read or discussed in school, were the existential questions that I was having, and that a lot of teenagers do have internally during their school period. And it doesn't feel like there's a lot of room for that to be put out there or discussed or seen.
A safe space to have those questions.
Yeah,
Normalcy, and there's no such thing as normal, but I think especially teenagers are scared to sort of, well, I'm having these thoughts of, is there a God? Why am I here? What am I going to do? What's my purpose? You know, and if I ask such questions to my friends, they laugh at me, But yeah, it's
but
definitely a subject. Sorry,
I think
carry
that
on.
everyone is going through the silent internal rites of passage, as opposed to a rite of passage that is being held by a community and that is being seen and spoken about and processed in a really healthy way. And I think it often becomes this internal darkness in a way that, for me, I only uncovered when I went on the Mankind Project weekend 30 years later, or whatever it was, 20 years later. And I honestly felt on that weekend that I'd been waiting for that space my entire life. It was like a huge weight off my shoulders, because I was seen for who I was and how I could use that to give back to my community, and how I could use that in the world to find a sense of purpose and to be me as an individual, and how that's a positive, as opposed to something that I would have buried, or that I would have tried to hold back because it
Mm.
wasn't relevant, or it wasn't productive, or whatever.
Yes, I think at school, you're so busy trying to find your place. And I think that's what's wrong with the world today, is that kids today have so many different boxes, even though they're under the same umbrella. Um, Look, I am sort of on the right side of, I am a conservative thinker. Not that I'm against any individual, but I think there's definitely pressure on kids to become more conformative and to find. I know with my son, he has gotten pressure from other friends to say that he's not straight, or he's not one way or another. And that's something, I mean, that's a whole other topic for another time. Um, but kids at a young age are trying to fit in. They don't want to be alone. They don't want to feel isolated. And schooling, the archaic 200-year-old way of schooling, definitely makes one feel alone. Like
Absolutely.
you're too scared to put up your hand to attempt to answer the question, because someone's going to make a snarky remark, or you're going to be teased, or you're going to be laughed at. And because there's all this, well, that's how I felt at school as well. Or you'll have a disappointment from the teacher, or yeah, it's terrible. It's traumatizing proper. Yeah.
It can be a traumatizing sort of time of your
Events.
life.
So let's talk now. Okay, so let's go back to Reggio and the social aspect of school. Um, you were talking like the Mankind Weekend, and so you learned amazing things. So how did you find the Mankind Weekend? What was your journey to finding them? Like, what were you searching for?
I suppose a sense of how to be a man in a world that wasn't toxic, that wasn't shut down, that
Mm-hmm.
wasn't at a lack of a sense of purpose, or just an acceptance of myself, or an acceptance of the fact that I didn't feel good enough. That I think that a lot of men feel, and that manifests into everything, into every aspect of your life, your relationships with your children, your work, your your drive, your motivation, your a relationship with yourself and how you see yourself. And that it just got to a point where I was sort of feeling that what I had wasn't giving me the support that I needed. I only realized on that weekend that what I actually needed was a process to be seen, that I needed when I was 16 or 18, to be taken through a process where men said to me, "Who are you and what do you have to give to the world?" As the individual that you are. And that was a huge change, a huge moment in my life, to have men also struggling and also crying and also feeling so pressured to be a certain way or fit into ideas of what masculinity are. Yeah, I've been reading a book about male depression, which has been absolutely fascinating, and it's called "I Don't Want to Talk About It." Just see if I can find the name, but it's about male depression, and it's about how it's endemic in the relationships that we have with our fathers and our fathers' fathers, and how it's perpetuated through the generations. But basically, what I'm saying is that this is happening anyway. Every boy, every girl, they are having some sort of rites of passage, in inverted commas, internally during those high school years of their life, trying to figure out who they are, what their purpose is, what their role to play is in the world, and how to navigate that. And we don't give them any platform in school to speak about it, or to feel held, or to feel seen, or to feel that they have people who support them through that process. So that we have to just do that on our own internally, and it becomes such a mess. And it takes us maybe 20 years or our entire lives to realize that we don't have a sense of purpose, or that we're not doing what we really want to do. And so things like, for me, which are so important, I wish I had been spoken to at school about things like emotional intelligence, EQ, conflict management, social skills at work, and how to speak to people, how to develop compassion and a sense of empathy, and be able to put yourself into someone else's shoes, for example. That's a skill that I see in adults often, that people just have never done that they don't have that ability to do that. It's taken me really long time.
It's a void.
Blame, it's this person's doing it wrong, or the government is doing it wrong, or someone outside of me is always the problem.
We need to be responsible.
You have to take responsibility for your life, and for the people, the relationships that you have with the people around you, with yourself, because otherwise it's just, you just spend your whole life externalizing everything and never actually claiming your power, I suppose, as in a sense, is what I'm getting at.
Yes. And school doesn't get us there. I actually felt one day that it's actually a terrible waste of time. It's a terrible, and I had an idea that they should be doing conscription in a way at school. Like, I would say, change the model completely, especially in this country, where encourage more children to go to vocational schools, teach them a skill, or at least I think it starts too late. Sorry, my puppy is playing. It starts way too late.
We sort of stumble through it in our adulthood and try and figure it out.
Yeah.
And suddenly realize that, that school was a waste of time, basically. That it didn't work for us personally, and we have to reinvent our own learning process that does work for us. I think it's so
Nice.
important for us as adults to continue learning, to not become stagnant, and not stuck in our ways, and not stuck in our ways of thinking, because inherently your children take that on, and your children
Correct.
see that in you, and your children go, oh, okay, maybe I've also got it figured out. But we never have it figured out, and that's part of being human, you know.
That's our journey. That's our journey. And if we're lucky enough to get to at least understand an aspect of that, we're better off. But it's so funny we've come full circle in a way, because I was with someone who's very spiritual this weekend. And hopefully they'll be on the show soon. Les, if you watch this is about you. And we actually said at the end of our meeting that we wish the world to become unstuck emotionally. And I think when people get stuck either in the past, in a trauma, in a grief situation, it's soul destroying. You know, in an event, in a job, in an unfulfilled relationship, it's terrible to be stuck. And our school system, like we said, is stuck. And it needs to change. And hopefully someone...
And there is so much change happening. There really, really is. There are so many people, like I say, doing homeschooling, trying different things. So this system from Italy is just one of the many different approaches to schooling that have come up in the past few years, I would say. Of course, everyone knows about Waldorf, Montessori, but there's a whole revolution of homeschooling happening at the moment all over the world. And people really are trying and experimenting because people see that it's not fitting. I wanted to look at, there was a quote here that said 13 million US students are likely to drop out of school during the next decade, costing the country $3 trillion, for the reason that traditional education is not working for them. Because like we say, it's been exactly the same since 1820 it was proposed.
It's actually...
So my idea of an ideal learning space is somewhere where we can bridge as many gaps as possible across age, across
ethnicity,
sexuality,
and obviously female, male,
gender, age gaps, language gaps. So to do that, we have to use tools that are accessible to people from different cultures. So, for example, music, art, things that are not necessarily static, but are open to change and open to interpretation. And then also be sitting. So I imagine instead of it being a teacher standing at the front and a bunch of students sitting at the desk, it would be a circle. And radio is exactly that. We sit in a circle because it's collaborative, and everyone's voice is just as relevant as the teacher's voice, for example. The input from the children is so valuable that it's recorded and studied and applied to the curriculum itself, or really, really valued. And that's part of what I felt, is that I wasn't valued. And that that's something we need. We need to feel valued when we're sitting in our classroom or our learning process or from our teacher. And the teacher wants to feel that too. So I do think it's about using a lot of new resources and a lot of new different tools that we haven't used before. Like movement, like art, but when I say, I mean, obviously art and music are a huge industry and a huge schooling system in and of themselves. But I'm talking about learning math through visuals, learning science through origami, learning, all of these subjects, all of this information
Mm-hmm.
in different, through different mediums that are accessible to many different people who learn in different ways.
Okay. Yeah, I'd love you to explain a carbon structure with origami. That would be quite cool.
Exactly.
Um,
It's and you see you're already fascinated about learning that. But if someone said to you, "Here, read a book, read it like 300-page book about you know what I mean? Like, why do we do that?
over it. I can't
Engage
even.
it.
I want to read more, but I'm so like I look at. I mean, what's that famous book for the War and Peace, isn't it? Like that famous book that's this thick, right?
Yes.
Like it's apparently an incredible story, but just the sheer size of that book is so intimidating that you don't even want to start it. Like I did get through Lord of the Rings, I must be honest. I have it here, but it was and it was the tiny little print. Maybe if they dotted it up and like they have in books and stuff, it would be better. But it's hectic, like, and we forced to do it. It's not, instead of like you have your set work, right? Your set work at school. Instead of a set work, I found Macbeth, God, Shakespeare. Can I ask you, why are we still doing Shakespeare? And I mean, that's fine. I mean, I don't mind. I think I've got actually an illustrated version of Shakespeare here somewhere, which is fine. Some of the Shakespeare was great, and obviously there's a way. But I mean, can we not try something else? Or am I putting my foot in it now?
No, absolutely. I think that children should be able to ask that question in the class, and the teacher should be able to answer that. They should be able to say, "Why are we learning Shakespeare?" And the teacher should be able to say, "Because 1, 2, 3, and 4." Or because I love Shakespeare. Maybe that's the best answer for the teacher, because it engages me, and I absolutely love this part. Look at this part, and she reads it really passionately, and all the kids are engaged because she's interested. But if it's imposed upon the teacher just as much as it's imposed upon the children, it's still going to be passive information that goes in the one ear, not the other. So of course, it's also the way that it's taught, and I'm sure that any of us can remember one specific teacher who just stuck in our memory because of the way that they taught, the way that they.
You mean in a positive light? You mean in a
Yeah.
positive light? Yes.
Yes. Sure.
Yes, and I'm going to actually try and get that teacher on. He's actually teaching overseas now, and his wife is also a teacher. I'd love to have him on the show again sometime. Well, not again, but when I can have him on. And I'd love to have you on again, and we can even do a specific topic. We can talk existentialism. We can talk philosophy. We can talk Shakespeare. I don't mind. But I just find, I think the school experience for also teenagers, and especially in a co-ed school, it's very hectic. It's very daunting. You're dealing with your hormones. You're worried about the pimple that's popping out, or perhaps you didn't find your other sock and you're worried someone's noticing your other sock, and it's slightly off color to your other sock. And also school uniforms. I was privileged enough to go to a private school where there was a uniform, but it wasn't as rigid as your white shirt with your proper, gray proper starched skirt. I think that's what I find like being in that rigid structure as well. You have to all be. I get the idea of a uniform because they obviously want kids to feel a part of something. But we always found like America's system fascinating, where kids can come as they are with whatever color hair, whatever piercings, whatever tattoos, whatever clothes. We've got some. Are you looking at the comments? Is there anything jumping out at you?
Almost all of the sort of progressive education that's mentioned by anyone in the comments is all in Europe. Finland, Netherlands, Sweden, and they're doing incredible things with education. They really, really are.
Well, I have a wish or a blessing for you that you have a light or a pathway to get in, to enable children to find their path. For you, I see you searching something, but I wish it for you. I wish it for you that you're enabled to find an education system in this country, like, say, in Finland. Have you contacted?
We have to create
Pardon?
one. We have to pioneer one.
Mm,
Many
mm,
people are doing that, and we have to pioneer it together as parents and as caregivers and as teachers.
mm,
If we want hope, I think we have to create it. And I think that that's something that South Africans develop, is a sense of a very strong sense of pioneering things, because they can see that the government's not going to do it. And you either sort of live in a sense of frustrated hopelessness, or you catalyze it into something that will change just your local community. Start a
mm.
garden.
Yeah.
Teach the kids in the streets to break dance. You know what I mean? Just
Yeah, like teach, or
something.
I suppose, what age would you, how, I suppose, awareness of the environment. You spoke about the social aspect, how we do not deal with conflict. Like, it's so bizarre that at school we were taught, okay, now you've obviously, I don't know if you don't have children yet, but I mean, obviously you have children, so obviously the one child has conflict with the other, and then you say, okay, Timmy, say sorry to Tando, say sorry to Timmy. That doesn't happen in the real world. In the real world, people backstab, and people hurt, and people don't confront, and people block. I mean, look at what is it, and gaslight, and I mean,
Yeah,
there's a whole new world that is happening where people are just not ready to deal with the truth. And that's my sort of passion, is that I hate hidden, for a better word, bullshit.
agendas.
I'd rather the truth be out than it be hidden, if that makes any sense. Like, parents still teaching their children that there's a stork, and the stork visits mommy and daddy, and then in 9 months' time it comes down, and then you were born, kind of thing. And up until literally 10 years ago, I heard on a prominent archaic radio station have this discussion, and people were phoning in and saying, yes, that's how they explain the birds and the bees to their kids. And it's just bizarre. It's just bizarre. Obviously, age appropriate. Talking about age appropriate, let's.
Well, I
For any,
absolutely, yeah.
look at this one. This is age appropriate. Look at this. Look at this. Huh? Yes. So this is the noise I've been muting the whole time, because it's playing with bones and, like, bowls and things. So this is my latest.
I'm sure he has a really fantastic approach to foundation education.
Yeah, I think, and that's another thing. Why aren't pets allowed in school? I mean, at school, I remember I brought my, what was it, a guinea pig, and I had to have him hidden, when in actual fact it would have been such a good tool to say, this is a guinea pig. He is found in this place, and they sleep mostly during the day, and they are nocturnal, and they eat certain seeds and nuts and grasses, and these grasses are grown from this. And, like, you can create any topic from a single, like, a little being, and
Yeah.
and in the end, I was forced to call my mom to take it home early, because it was creating a distraction.
Right.
No. Do you know what I mean? It's just, yeah.
I just wanted to go back to something you said earlier. So I think all of these things that we see, for example, an inability to speak to the people at work, or address conflict, or those are the kind of things that we need to look at. Why do we not have those skills, or where does that come from? And then we can address that in school, and we can say, how do we teach our kids to have an ability to take initiative in a conversation, or to manage conflict in an effective way, or to have an ability to self-reflect at a younger age, or empathize, or be compassionate, or
Or be able to set a boundary and say, I do not
right.
appreciate that behavior. It's, done, kind of thing. That
Because
too.
I just think that a lot of the problems that we experience in our day-to-day life and work, in our relationships in later life as an adult, are things that I would have loved to broach when I was 16, as opposed to when I was 36. Do you know what I mean? If someone had said to me, look, it's normal to have disagreements with loved ones. It's normal to feel a
down
sense of,
some days.
yes,
Sorry.
exactly, that
Yeah. You
that
can't be happy all the time.
exactly this idea. So
Yeah,
things like,
and also, I mean, I learned from my mother to be a people pleaser, and I would get so upset if someone didn't like me or something. And I taught this lesson to my son, and I said there are billions of people on the planet. Some of them will like you, and some of them won't. And you will like some of them, and you won't like some of them either. I don't know if I said
and
that right. Did I say that right?
you may well struggle with a sense of not being liked. And if you do, where's that coming from? So those are the kind of questions that are important to broach
Correct.
when you're younger, and to discuss openly, as opposed to have this consistent internal process with yourself that just goes round and round. And yeah, I got very depressed in school,
I'm sorry.
because I was having all these ruminations and these internal processes that no one was telling me about. No one was talking about emotional awareness, or emotional intelligence, or emotional sort of how to manage one's relationship with yourself.
Yeah, that's true. We don't know. And often, I mean, we it's a cliche, like, oh, you have to love yourself first. But I know women in their 60s who have struggled till then to understand what loving the self is, you know. Loving yourself, and we always put, I think a lot of people put themselves last, and there's nothing wrong. I think even in the doctrine of religion, it's told you're not allowed to love yourself, which is also, I think, there's a Jewish word, bobamasis, which is a lot of BS, because unless you love yourself, how the heck can anyone love you, or you love anyone else? If that makes it makes sense to me. I don't know. That's how I figure it. You
I
have to kind of.
always
Pardon?
say I always say that you're the one you end up with. So
You're the one you end up with. True.
yourself is shit, then you're always going to have a problem.
Yeah, if you can't stand yourself,
It's
and a
also a
lot of
process, there is no getting it right.
yeah, no, for sure.
It's a
But
process,
yeah,
not an event. It's not like one day you suddenly just love yourself and off you go and ride off into the sunset.
no,
Ongoing process, that it is a lifelong process.
it's a
Um,
learning. It's a learning.
and
It's
I
a
think one of the biggest things for me is realizing that it's okay to not even it's okay. It's important to feel shit. It's important to feel sadness. It's important to feel
yes.
anguish and doubt and all of these things that are human, that I spend a lot of time picking and choosing and saying this one's right and this one's wrong, and all I end up doing is making myself feel worse. So those are the kinds of things that we need to talk to our teenagers about, how to manage that internal thing. Sorry, I've lost you.
Yeah. The constant dialogue, the tape. My father used to call it a tape that plays around in your head. I think it had something to do with, it's apparently a Scientology lingo. Not that I'm a Scientologist or anything, but he might have studied it at one stage. But there's a tape recorder in your head that goes round and round and round. And it's that. And also, someone once told me, how often we go, oh, I'm so stupid, like you've forgotten, you were at the shop and you needed to collect this thing from the shop next door and you completely forgot, or you made a mistake, you forgot to save. Okay, nowadays, thank God, computers save everything before closing, or they still always give you the option. But in the old days, something's that we take so for granted, and then you go, oh, I'm such an idiot, how could I have done that? Or you didn't notice the car tire down or whatever it was, and now you've ruined the tire. You've basically driven on that's another thing. Like, I had no idea until I met Gigi just how functional and how tires actually work, and how you need to look after them, and how it was never anything. I mean, it's such a girly thing, but these are all things that were never taught to me.
Yes.
And my point, I suppose, being is that it's a learning process. It's all a learning process.
I think looking at that dialogue is so important, that internal dialogue, and also realizing that internal dialogue isn't necessarily all you. Maybe part of it came from your parents, part of it came from somewhere else, and that it's so important to question the tape that's playing in your head.
Yes, and also you reminded me of my point, is that when you say something like, oh, I'm an idiot or whatever, your brain doesn't know that you're not joking, that you're not being serious. So that computer, your brain, takes cognizance of what you've just said and believes it. If that makes sense. Does that make sense? Like, I believe in that.
Don't just believe every thought that you have. Yes, exactly. Stand guard at the door of your thoughts or something.
Yeah, like you need. That's why I remember there was also a video on Instagram or something, that it's so important to look at yourself in the mirror and go, I am clever, I can do this. Step at a time. If you're having a huge dilemma, I think we've gone into sort of the progressiveness of philosophy at this stage, but it's so important
it's very relevant in education,
to talk to yourself, to calm yourself, and to say, I might be feeling scared, but if I take if I just get through the next 2 minutes.
So can you imagine if this conversation was had in a school context, in front of a class, with the kids in the class? I just think that would be quite incredible, quite life-changing.
And he agrees. See, we're having an agreement here. Hold on. He wouldn't let me grab him. But he agrees. Give Russell here. But yeah, thank you, Damien. I think we will definitely have you back again. And we will try and put puppies away next time. He's definitely gaining his voice. But yes, I think and I think there's so many tools to use. Yes, okay, I know. I don't think he's able to lick any part of his anatomy, so I'm safe.
I'm busy exploring these tools at the moment, specifically with I'm trying to work more into older kids as well, but I'm mainly working with about 8 to 13. I'm busy building a curriculum or a program at the moment that is accessible to as many learning types as possible, and using many different tools. And so you can check out that progress on my Instagram page if you want to follow me there. And I'm so grateful for any input that anyone has to give, or something that they've found really effective, or a personal experience of a learning process that they've had that they just really found poignant and powerful for them, because that's where the magic lies. That's where the thing is, what worked yesterday will not work today necessarily either. So change is really the only constant.
Or for that particular group or individual. Yeah, but thank you. I mean, we could sit here for another hour and carry on, and I get that. I get that. But I want to sort of cut it short. But I think we will have you on again. We'll discuss more in-depth topics. Maybe people can suggest things, but everyone check out origami.zoo on Instagram, at origami.zoo on Instagram, blah, blah, blah. And yeah, I really wish you the best to bring this into the South African system. I think you do great, amazing work, and thank you for having the guts to take from your personal experience and share it with us, and for becoming
everyone will do it with me. We need to work together on this one.
Okay, awesome. So I'm just gonna stay on. Don't run away too quickly, but I'm just gonna say goodbye to our viewers. Thank you so much for joining me, everybody. Things to think about. Good luck with the rest of the school year, and good luck with filling out all those forms and wrapping books. TTFN, everybody. See you next week. Cheers.